about 80% of Claude Code system prompt for Opus and Fable 5. The company reported no measurable loss on its coding evaluations, and this sounds like a story about writing fewer instructions, but it's really about what happens when the model can carry more of the work. And I understood this difference when I looked at my own agent fleet, and I had seen that it had 230 work items marked in various stages of completion, and nothing was actually done. 137 of those work tasks were treated as complete, even though there was no record to show that the intended result had happened. The runner deciding whether the work had succeeded was just looking at an exit code and the same agent summary of what it just done. So the worker had produced the work, written the summary, and effectively graded it itself. This is the part that the shorter prompt exposes. The model needs fewer words to keep moving, but the system needs a very clear way to decide when it's actually finished. So I had built a fleet of agents and given every worker permission to approve its own work, which is what resulted in this giant mess. My prompt was just doing too much. The usual response to agent failure is just more instructions. The model misses a check, so someone's going to add the check to the Claude.md. I'm sure you've all been there. It uses the wrong tool, so someone adds an example. It stops after a successful API call, so someone's going to add 3 paragraphs explaining that the successful API call is not the same as finishing the job. The prompt grows. The system does not become more reliable, though, at the same speed. The prompts start carrying the mission, the rules, the exceptions, the memory, the quality bar, and the full history of every embarrassing failure, which feels very responsible, but it's just mixing several jobs together. A prompt is prose. You've heard me say this. It can express intent, it can explain the outcome worth pursuing, and it can give an agent the context that is hard to infer from just your repo or code. It remains a suggestion interpreted by the model, though. Suggestion. That is the key word here. And the harness is where enforcement will live. The harness controls the tools, permission state, retries, artifacts, approval records, provider calls, and checks that run after the work. It decides which transitions are allowed and which claims need evidence. Anthropic's explanation of the change says its own Claude Code setup had accumulated conflicting instructions across the system prompt, the ClaudeMD, and the skills. So the company says newer versions of these models also use artifact skills and deferred tools and richer references for work that used to sit in the system prompt. So basically, you no longer need to tell it where files are. It will kind of just discover them. So what happened is the words moved, the control surface moved, but your skills aren't working the same. So when I ran my audit against all these work tasks that were completed and saw that they weren't been done, I saw what had been hiding. Done sounded like a one fact in my records. The file is done. The deployment is done. The campaign is done. The follow-up is done. Each sentence smuggles in several different claims. A file exists. The file is good. The file has reached the right place. The person at the place received it. The thing the file was meant to cause eventually happened. Those events run on wildly different clocks. A draft can exist in seconds. A competent review can take hours. A provider receipt may arrive a minute later. A sale, a reply, a ranking change, or reduction in failures might take days to notice. So I compressed all of these clocks into one green label, done. Then that's not ideal, obviously. So the agents were producing plenty of motion. Commands ran, files were appearing, pull requests were open, and the heartbeats were all green. But when I audited this, my one loop reported 4,000 times that 3,800 of them produced 0 artifacts. So across my 214 scheduled jobs that the agents had marked as done, only 19 had registered a check for the result that the job was supposed to create. So essentially, out of 214 scheduled jobs, only 19 were ever completed, which is not great for a system. So which work had actually succeeded? And the answer was never in an agent's final message, because agents can lie to you. The answer was in the target system. It's in the artifacts, it's in the receipt, it's in the readback, and it's in the outcomes record. So that is when done stopped being useful, because done is not the same. So better models make weak finish lines worse. Anthropic's current Fable 5 documentation describes a model that can sustain multi-day goal-oriented work, delegate to subagents, navigate ambiguity, and search code bases and check its own work. Checking its own work will come into play later. So that is a big capability improvement, but it also raises the cost of a weak stopping condition. A model that writes one paragraph can give you a bad paragraph, but call it done. A model that works across repositories, providers, browsers, database, task systems, and subagents can create a long trail of locally reasonable actions. But the final state can miss your true intent, and each step just makes it worse. So the stronger model doesn't need a long story about every possible mistake. It just needs a clear goal and the right evidence at the right point, and a system that can tell the difference between a progress and completion. What is the definition of done? And this is the part that I kept missing personally when I was treating the prompts as just a control surface. I was trying to make pros perform the work of a runtime. Use the canonical source as pros until the harness can name the source and retrieve it. Verify the deployment is pros until a check reads the public route and compares it to the deployed version. Do not send twice is a pros until the action has a key. Make sure the client receives it is proof until the provider receipt and delivery evidence are attached to the work. A model can be capable of choosing the next actions, but the system still needs authority over what counts as a valid transition. So this is why I changed the way that I think about approval. My agents produce artifacts. Most agent systems ask for approval at the tool call boundary. Approve the browser action, approve the API request, approve the permission, approve the intent before the work has been assembled, the thing that will leave the system. And the timing is super convenient for runtimes. But it's weak for the person responsible for the result. And I know you've all seen this play out in the real world. There's no one here who can tell me that they have not experienced this with any of their agents. So the useful approval object is always the artifact. It's not the intent. It's not the actions. It is the results. So an agent preparing an article should produce the final copy, the target account, the approved claims, and the version being reviewed, and the public readback required after publication. If you approve an article to be published and the agent messes up that article after it's published, how will you know? How will you verify? How will your system verify that the article, after you've hit approved, is actually completed, posted, and done? What is your definition of done for that, right? Mine is it has to have all the pictures. It has to have byte for byte every word that was in the source. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it messes up, and it has to go fix that. But it can do that on its own because it understands what the definition of done is. So an agent preparing an email should produce the exact body, recipients, attachments, consent record, and the proper evidence. An agent changing software should produce the diff, test, deployment target, rollback, and independent checks against the running system. The artifact is what a person can inspect. The artifact is what a person can improve. And that lets an agent research, draft, inspect, test, and assemble without asking a human to supervise its every keystroke. The human gate appears when the result is ready to become consequential. That lets the agent work better with your systems. So a tool call, for an example, a tool call is just one implementation detail inside of that decision. It is not the decision, right? The approval packet binds the artifact to the intended effect. It contains the exact version being improved, the source inputs, the workflow identity, the destination, the expected external effect, and then the evidence required after the execution to be marked after done, right? So let's talk about execution after approval. The sequence is very simple. The agent does the work, the agent produces the artifact, a human approves the artifact, the downstream runtime executes the approved item, the provider returns a receipt or a link or something like that, and then that sequence separates creation from consequence. It also gives a harness a real job. The harness can require an artifact before approval. It can prevent execution against different versions. It can attach the approval to a mutable identifier, and it can keep the work open when a public readback or the provider receipt is missing. And a public receipt could be a link, the post, right? It's what you read. It's what the world will read. It's the email that should be sent out, the drafts. So the prompt explains what the work is for, and the harness makes the workflow true. And that is the change to Anthropic's prompt reduction. The model layer is getting lighter, and the operating layer has to be more exact. So I came up with this term, ECO. Execution, craft, outcome. I didn't want to build another framework, but it came out after I did this audit. And it came when I had those 230 work records that were completed, but none of them could answer my simple questions. Was the work executed? Was the work good enough? Did it produce the result I wanted? And those three different questions hide inside done, right? Is it done? Was the work executed? Was the work good enough? And did it produce the results that I wanted? So I'm calling this replacement ECO, execution, craft, and outcome. I did not invent this in isolation at all. Thankfully, we have way smarter people that you can replicate their ideas from. NASA separates verification from validation. It did the product conform to its requirements, and does it work for its intended use in its intended environment? The FDA makes a similar distinction in software validation. The FDA makes a similar distinction in software validation. Define the intended use, set the acceptance criteria, record the result, and base the conclusion as evidence. The CDC evaluation guidance separates activities and outputs from the outcomes. The UK Magenta book adds another distinction that I needed, which was observing that an outcome occurred is different from proving that the intervention caused it. This is very important. I need you to really think about this one. Observing that an outcome occurred is different than proving that the intervention caused it. Causation, correlation, right? This is super important. You're going to want to lock in on that. You're going to want to think about that for a while. The NIST also added some control questions I was missing, which was who has authority and the independence to check the work. If a small team can't split every duty, then what's compensating the check? What compensating check catches a mistake? If you have your own agent verifying itself, how do you know it's not lying? You can't have an agent self-grade. You need someone else to look at it. So execution asks whether the intended effect happened in the real world. And what I mean by this is a local file is weak evidence for a published article. A provider receipt is stronger. A public link of the exact approved article reconciled against the approved version is even stronger. Craft asks whether the artifact clears the professional bar of its field. All right, let me go through this. Let me back this up. So first we have execution. Let's go back to the ECO. So execution. So those ideas gave me the shape of ECO, which is execution is the delivery and verification question. Craft is the professional quality question, and outcome is the downstream effect and attribution question. Execution asks whether the intended effect happened in the real world. A local file is weak evidence for a published article. A provider receipt, a public link, something that can verify that it is now live, reconciled against the approved version is the strongest version of this. Craft asks whether the artifact clears the professional bar. A page can return a HTTP 200 and still be poorly written or broken when you view it. Software can still deploy and be unsafe. A video can render and still have broken audio, and an article can technically be published but be missing pictures or contain invented statistics. Outcomes ask So that's what craft does. It meet that professional bar, that taste, if you will? So outcome asks whether the work caused the result it was meant to create. So the article might be live and excellent while generating no attention, no leads, no impressions. The email might be delivered and persuasive, and it doesn't produce any replies. The software might behave exactly as specified while failing to reduce support volume. Outcomes live after delivery. It needs a declared metric, baseline threshold, source, owner, and observation window to be useful. And the separation changes the terminal states that you can follow. Work becomes shipped when its required execution and craft floor is clear. The delivery happens and the work met the declared professional standard. The outcome obligation is now visible. Work becomes closed when execution, craft, and outcome have all cleared their required floors or their baselines. Does it meet? Does it sound? Does it look? So a campaign can be shipped with an outcome read due in 2 weeks. It can become closed after the result is observed against the measure chosen before launch. So you can ship a campaign. You have to let it run for 2 weeks to see the outcome. Did it produce more clicks? Did it do the action that I hoped? Did it drive more sales? The execution was there, the craft was there, but the outcome you're still waiting for. And this is very important in long-running agents because they have to come back and check that. They have to see what's going on. They have to understand that what their goals are and what is the definition of done and good to be able to manage these workflows effectively. So the actor may submit. So in these types of workflows, there is a role and separation of duties. The actor may submit evidence, but the actor may not issue against its own verdict. That rule is the center of my system. The agent can point to the artifact, receipt, test results, the public target, or a measurement record, and an independent gate will compute the grades and state from evidence another party can retrieve or reproduce. The worker searches for a path that works. The verifier tries to falsify the claim that the required floor was met. And this is how a successful local action stops being mistaken for a completed goal. Take the article you're reading right now, or this video. That draft that I made was an artifact. It had a source trail, it had a claims register, it had a voice requirement in a specific audience. A review can say that all of that is ready, but that still will not publish. The approved bytes have to reach the intended LinkedIn account. The provider has to return a durable receipt, a link. A separate check has to read the public article back and compare the live version with the approved version. And a later observation window can measure whether the article reached the people it was meant to. And those are 4 different facts that are done, that mean done, right? And this is why I've come up with Ego, to fill this void. Ads are a perfect place where you can see this because you can have specific acceptance criteria before making them go live. And so this is the schema. So this is the schema that I use for paid media. Artifacts, the approved creative, the primary text, the headline, the audience, the budget, the destination URL, the tracking parameters, and the campaign settings are all bound to one version. The acceptance criteria before approval. So the conversion event fires in the platform and test tool and arrives at the source of the truth database. The browser and server events carry the same event ID and deduplicate it. The event match quality is at least a 6. 8 is the target. Every destination URL has source, medium, campaign, content terms, and all is UTM filled out. Naming is machine readable. We do not have no copy in the names. Count and spending limits exist, and the policy and special category checks are passed. A human clicks the live destination and confirms that the ad's promise, offer, price, form, and tracking all agree. The kill budget, CPA ceilings, and checkpoint dates, baseline and sample size are written before the spend. The test uses a 0.05 or 80% power and a fixed sample size, so no winner can be called below 100 conversions per variant. The required proof artifacts, the test event output, the live ad, and the landing page on the phone. the test lead CRM record with its UTMs, the account and campaign limits readbacks, and then the ad review status, the data test plan, the 7-day reconciliation of the platform conversions against the database conversions, and any variance beyond 20% stops the claim and the spend. So for our machine checks, assert event deduplication, event match quality, naming, UTMs, budget limits, active status, at least 50 optimization events per ad set per 7 days, reconciliation variance, and pre-registered sample size. A platform conversion count is a provider receipt. It is not a business result. So here is some humanness to it. And this is part of the craft, does the intended buyer recognize the problem in their own words? Do they feel that the ad is speaking to them? Believe the promise and understand why they should act now on your ad? Is the creative good? Is the promise honest? Is the placement brand safe? And is an inconclusive test commercially actionable? The buyer can't be the only one answering these questions, right? Like you, the seller needs to, everyone needs to check this before something goes live. So here's now my terminal floors. So launched means pre-flight. Launch means pre-flight passed and the ads are active. Learning means tracking reconciles and the campaign is mechanically capable of working. And validated means conversions, downstream quality, and incrementality cleared their declared threshold. In eco terms, launched and learning are shipped, and validated is closed. The campaign can spend money, produce impressions, and report platform attributed leads without ever reaching closed. The writer can provide the drafts and its sources. The writer can provide evidence that the content gate passed. The writer cannot turn those facts into a publication or a business result. That's the difference between an agent producing an artifact and an agent claiming that the job is complete. My first implementation of all this is very much report only. It computes the state. It shows what predicates are missing. It does not pretend that written requirements are an executable check. Verify the public page stays open until someone or something actually reads the public page. And this creates very ugly dashboards. But it's a dashboard I can trust. The point isn't to make every workflow wait for a second person. A provider receipt, an authoritative database, a query, a deterministic test, a public readback, or a named reviewer can each provide an independent evidence path. The point is to stop the producer from silently becoming the judge. An agent that creates the artifact should not judge it. It just doesn't work. So Anthropic gives concrete examples of subtraction. An older Claude code instruction said to avoid comments and long doc strings, and then the newer instructions will ask Claude to match the surrounding code. The old setup relied on examples for tool use, and the newer puts more weights on expressive interfaces and tool descriptions. Verifications and code review have moved into skills that can load when the job needs them, which is way better for your context limits. And that is a way better division of labor than adding one more sentence to a permanent prompt. It also explains why the headline 80% shorter does not mean 80% less system. It means less instruction trapped in one always present block with more context loaded at the point of use and more state represented in artifacts, tools, skills, and checks. The model has enough room to use its judgment. The runtime has more responsibility for making the important facts available and making the dangerous transitions visible to you. So a prompt can get shorter now.